for joining. Happy Friday. You're here at Dope People. I have my co-host with me today, Peter. How you doing?
I'm
Hey.
good. I got out of New York before the storm hit, so I'm over here chilling, Indiana. Restoring my
Indiana.
soul. Yeah.
You were in Puerto Rico last time.
Yeah, we're going international with this. This is Dope
Okay.
People around the globe.
Okay. Well, cool, man. If this is your first time tuning in, this is Dope People. We do this every Friday. And the point is just to talk to people in the industry that we know are just doing dope shit. They have dope stories. It's real authentic relationships, people we've met over the years. Today, I do want to shout out Lulu Sway. She's not with us today. She's on a plane. Everybody's traveling but me these days. But it was her birthday 2 days ago. And she's normally on the show, so I just want to say happy birthday, Lulu.
Leo season, hey.
Hey. And then today's episode is really, really important. And I'm actually upset we haven't had this earlier. I've been in this cannabis game for many years now, and it's a repeat story. It keeps coming up. It's in things outside of cannabis as well. This misogynistic view of the world needs to be addressed. And we have some dope ladies to bring it to you today. I'm good friends with both of them. I was thinking about this when I was prepping for this. I met you both at the same event in New York, Liv's event, which was top notch, by the way. Peter, tell the people who we have with us today.
Today we have, since Jacobi let it off with Liv Vasquez, who is a chef, content creator, vibe curator, restaurateur, recipe maker, just everything you can think of in terms of creating things that can heal. That's the impression and the feeling and the vibe that she gives off, and it's a concern that you can see apparent in everything that she does. Most people will probably be familiar with her through Netflix's Cooked with Cannabis. She won the Thanksgiving or Holiday Haze episode, and she whooped ass with that shit. She's vegan. Plant is medicine, or plants are medicine. Food is medicine. Really, her entire career exemplifies that, and it's really an honor to have you here today. On the flip side, we have the high vibe curator, Leighana and Lynn. Leighana is an event producer, writer, blogger. She's worked in the industry. She managed a dispensary back in the day. Both of these lovely women are Oregon alums, started with the industry from the grassroots. They know how this game goes. Leighana works with our team as well, doing all things from production and event curation to now she's been pivoting hard in this digital scene. She has a million ideas that she's doing for brands like Popular, for Ladies of Paradise. She has her hands in a bunch of things, and I'm really happy to have both of these incredible women, exemplary for focusing on healing and education and just getting shit done and hustling and making their money in their lane. And without further ado, that's my intro to these lovely ladies.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you.
Bro, Peter, I've never had that good of an introduction to anything.
I could do you next time, Jacobi. You're supposed
like
to do yourself.
the head snaps and the vibes, like you were with it.
Yeah.
Ladies, what's up? How you guys doing? Are you both in Oregon?
Yes.
Okay.
We're usually both traveling so much, so it's like for both of us to be in the same place, like.
Definitely. Yeah, doing good. It's finally nice here. It was pretty shitty weather for a while, so yeah.
It's good to see both of you sitting still. I think that alone is a blessing.
Yeah.
True.
Yes, I'm really excited. I'm grateful for you guys to join. We're gonna get into it. I know we're gonna get into some deep shit, some heavy shit. Maybe we'll keep it light sometimes, but we just want your authentic selves, which I know is inevitable with you two. But before we go into it, Peter, what's been happening in the last couple weeks?
So a lot of things have been happening. I want to keep it light before we go into the dark. But so one really cool thing that happened internationally this week, for all those paying attention to plant medicine on the broader scale, this week Canada has allowed and paved the way for the use of psilocybin mushrooms in terminal patients. So these patients have end of life, they've been given terminal diagnoses, and Canada is allowing them to experiment with shrooms and psilocybin specifically in order to help them cope with the depression and anxiety that comes with a terminal diagnosis. As we all know, in the cannabis industry, it all starts with patient access in a small clinical trial. From there, regulators know it's safe, and then we can build on and create legislation that can create a whole industry. So that happened in Canada just in the past couple of weeks. It's a really bright light. Hopefully more, Canada's already been doing a whole lot of stuff on the R&D side as far as developing psychedelic companies and other molecules based on hacking the psychedelic molecules themselves. But this was more of a natural path. Anyways, that's something happening right now.
We have that on our ballot for Oregon, the SIO 34 for November. So if you're in Oregon, vote for recreational use and medical use psilocybin psychedelics.
Well,
that ballot initiative is for therapeutic use.
Yes.
Which would allow
for depression and mental illness. Yeah. Which in the Pacific Northwest, even just seasonal depression can really get you up here. So I think it's a good move.
So this one in Canada, Peter, if I was reading it correctly, it was about terminal patients.
Yeah.
Specifically for their depression and anxiety, given their scenario, not necessarily for whatever that terminal illness is. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's almost like too easy to say. If you're a terminal patient, like, I think you should be able to do whatever the fuck you want, as long as you're not harming anybody else.
We have some legislation here in the States for experimental treatments with drug companies that allow that kind of development, but it hasn't happened with drugs that are considered scheduled. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, I don't know, thinking from a risk perspective, right? Legislators might be a little bit more risk averse for drugs they don't know as much about. And in terminal patients, I could understand why that's a little bit easier to pass. Maybe that's a little morbid, but it makes sense.
Yeah, it takes on less risk for them if they're like, oh, all of a sudden too much psilocybin could be lethal. That removes risk for them as like a government entity to get sued.
You know what I want to happen is somebody take too many mushrooms and then they end up like healed, right? Their mindset is fine. They're sending vibes and like, boom, they come back.
There was a woman here in the States who accidentally took, it was LSD instead of something else. Like she thought it was like a tincture supplement and it was LSD, and she took a large amount, but it ended up like kind of counteracting some stuff. I can't remember exactly what it was. She had something going on in her brain, like with her brain. I can't remember if it was something that was like making her off balance, like her chemical imbalance or something. And that like accidental macro dose actually helped kind of take her full circle. And then she was like, I accidentally healed myself with LSD.
Wow.
Yeah. The emphasis with a lot of these therapies is through the use of a guide and a therapist. And it is for harnessing the psychological effects of psychedelics. But these molecules themselves also have very, very, very potent anti-inflammatory effects that make them able to treat diseases on a level that we don't usually think of them as. So they help on a psychological level that opens people up to being able to confront things within themselves for therapy. But also there are biologically different mechanisms that are anti-inflammatory and are anti-disease causing mechanisms. But all that stuff hasn't come to fruition as yet because we have been more focused on the psychological nature and the therapeutic nature, which is why Portland's emphasis is on the therapeutic aspects of talk therapy or a guide or shaman that has been traditionally used with these substances.
Nice. I think it goes without saying, but this is not medical advice. Anybody?
Oh yeah, not medical advice.
We're just
historical
talking. Nobody is
These
credible.
are anecdotes.
Yeah. All right, Peter, give us one more thing. What's happening?
Well, one real quick. There's this random show called Who Wants to Be the Next Marijuana Millionaire that got announced this week that will be coming. And it's basically like The Apprentice and Trump. And I think it's horrible. And the fact that it's happening is just like a testament to and it's based on like the founder of Advanced Nutrients, who's this.
Is it that guy Mike, Big Mike or something like
that?
Big
Mike. Yeah. And it's just that very misogynistic male empowerment. Like, I tell you, everything I've done is right. And if you want to be like me, you have to please me in every way. And it's really dumb. And I really wish it wasn't the case. And it's probably going to be popular. But hopefully it just gets popular in the sense that people want to learn about cannabis and have the impetus to get into the industry for themselves.
But what do you win? Like,
it's $1 million in connections, but we all know how.
$1 million in connections.
Yeah, I mean, we all know how those. Which one of Donald Trump's apprentice ended up becoming a millionaire or billionaire or whatever?
How many of those connections are black? How many are women?
Let's see if they even mention social equity in the show.
They did mention it?
War on drugs. Let's see if they mention it.
Oh.
It hasn't come out yet, yeah.
All right, well, stay tuned.
That was a random pop culture one. Another one that I wanted to get into was a Politico, the publication, put out a recent editorial article on some industry pundits believing that the pandemic has either hurt or helped the illicit marijuana market. And of course, it comes down to it's complex, and a big part of that ends up being a state-by-state thing. But the arguments that it's hurting the illegal market is that people have shied away from smoking and they're looking more towards edibles. And therefore, a lot of the illegal market, they may be able to take some edibles from a legal market and resell them or get them made on the low, but they don't really have the supply to make their own or the processes to make their own. So that's one argument, that the illicit market's taken a hit. Another argument is that people are social distancing from their dealers and don't want to like be around them, which more power to people if that's the case, but you can like drop a bag off. That wasn't a strong argument in my opinion. They're also making the argument that it's really coming down to a price point issue, which the illicit market will always be able to undercut the regulated market and offer cheaper products. And as this economic depression seeps its way into more and more people's houses and lives, people are just buying whatever's cheapest in order to make their own, in order to utilize the plant. So that's one argument. I don't know how you guys feel, but on the side of it's actually helping the market, is that, well, it's for the price issue mainly. And I don't know if you guys, what your guys' experiences has been. Have you been buying off market, illegal, legal? Yeah.
I feel like in Oregon, I mean, we were talking about this the other day. It's like the epitome of like really cheap, good weed. So, I mean, and some of it's not good, definitely too, but you can get like $60 ounces at some of these dispensaries. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like even with taxes, that's not like that much. And so there's definitely like really shitty weed. My partner manages a dispensary right now, and I know like at the beginning of quarantine, it was really, really busy. Like just when everyone was stocking up on toilet paper, everyone was like stocking up on weed, and we're like, shit, we're gonna be here, like gotta get all this weed. And but I think it's like kind of like mellowed out now, and it's like steady. for the most part, but that's just Oregon. I think, yeah, cannabis is super complex and it's going to be different state by state.
Yeah, before we were declared essential for cannabis, I think everybody was like panicking, and we have had an excess of cannabis for the last 2-3 years. I mean, tons, like a lot of excess. So that's why I was working so hard going to New York and doing CBD summer camp, was to get cannabis tourism boosted in Oregon so that people were here to consume all this great cannabis that we have. But it's really the same as like if you were in Florida and you couldn't sell oranges outside of Florida, the farmers would be selling orange juice for like a nickel a gallon, and their farms would be falling into disrepair because they'd be making no money at all. So that was something we actually had an issue with, to the point of there was a high suicide rate in cannabis farmers in Southern Oregon because they were just producing so much and they couldn't offload their product for a reasonable price. So we do have an excess of cannabis, which means we have, I mean, you can easily get a $5 eighth, throw a rock. And I mean, we live in cannabis privilege here for sure, but there's issues kind of that come with that as well. Any excess is going to have issues. So
especially hemp, like when hemp got really big last year, everyone in Southern Oregon planted all those like hemp fields, and then they planted them like middle of July. It didn't even make sense.
Mid-season. Yeah.
You know that these aren't going to work. And then all of the hemp plants like molded, and like it was really, really crazy last season. So many people were committing suicide in Southern Oregon. It was really sad.
It's truly sad. When, I mean, in Southern Oregon is the perfect terroir to grow cannabis. Like the Emerald Triangle that used to be in Humboldt County, because of weather patterns and El Nino, has all shifted up to be Oregon. Now our wine and our cannabis is much better than what's coming out of Napa or Sonoma or the Emerald Triangle, where the Emerald Triangle used to be, because the weather patterns have changed. Now they just have a lot of fires. They have dry land. They don't have what we have in Oregon, and specifically Southern Oregon. So to see those people who are literally making the best hemp and cannabis in the world, because it's the best place in the world territory wise for it, not survive is truly heartbreaking.
Jeez. Look, when it comes to the Oregon market, you guys obviously know your shit. But I want to get into the conversation that you know we're here to have today about your experience in the industry. And I know both of you have done work all over the country, and though you're based in Oregon, this isn't a hyper local thing, right? And like I've been in the industry for a while, and I've seen it in my same office. I've seen it, you know, through secondary accounts. And I want to talk generally before we get into your stories about the experience of women in the legal cannabis industry. Now, I know as early as 4 or 5 years ago, there was a huge craze that, you know, cannabis had at one point at least like 30-40% women executives or owners is kind of what was thrown out there. But I don't think that's a good reflection of what the experience is like. And I also think that number is a little bit embellished.
Well, it's dwindled for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Came out the gates a little bit strong, which makes sense. But the more capital comes in, you get into the boys club environment.
The more Big Mike's millionaire guys we have. Yeah.
Libertarians.
Yeah. The worst.
The toughest part for me, well, I don't know if the toughest, but the fact that we have an opportunity to create something net new, and we are still building it, and it's always going to have problems. But whereas if you go into the finance industry and trying to shake things up, like that's been here for hundreds of years, you're climbing up a really high mountain. Now, the mountain's growing very quickly in cannabis, and that precedent is being set. And personally, I find it unacceptable. But I want to understand your experience in this industry, and I'm going to approach it as a naive male as best as I can.
Well, I can say I got into this industry 5 years ago, because actually 6 now, because it was set to be a more female dominated industry. It's a female plant, only female plants produce. Like, there was a lot of feminine energy that was in the industry when I first got into it. And I do think that a lot of people who were probably against cannabis or hemp or CBD heard that $22 billion industry by 2022, that quote that one person put out, like, however 3 years ago, and it just made like a gold rush mentality of these guys in khakis with lanyards who just want to make some money quick and like get into an industry. And I mean, I got into this industry and saw like there is a lot of that, like, I worked for a woman of color that I ended up suing for sexual harassment and discrimination, which was heartbreaking. I don't want to do that, but it was the internalized misogyny and internalized racism that she couldn't see in herself that made a toxic working and dangerous working environment for other women of color to be there. So I think that there has to be accountability when you get a slice of the pie in cannabis, to understand, as a woman, for me as a woman of color, the table is still being built in cannabis. There's not, oh, there's only one seat for a woman and only maybe a seat for a woman of color. The table is still being built. So I'm holding this seat for my friend. I'm putting my coat over this seat for my other friend. You know, like, I think that it's easy to bring in women into the industry and bring them back. And so when I sued for sexual harassment and assault and discrimination from Mind Right, the dispensary in Oregon, I did it because, you know, most people don't pursue a sexual harassment lawsuit. I did it because I needed a case for other women to build their case to come back into the industry. And I get letters literally every day, DMs, emails, messages from women who were saying, I left the industry because I worked at a dispensary and I was assaulted, or I was a grower and I was assaulted, or I was working out trimming and they said I could only trim nude. Like, these things that we hear, literally, I hear them all day, that I don't think people understand, that if it's an agriculture industry, there are people being abused somewhere in the process, most likely. So we really have to look to the fields, we have to look to the dispensaries, we have to look to the people packaging, and then we have to look to how people are being treated in labs. It has to be every person who touches the product is providing equity for women, people of color, the people who we want to see in the industry. And I'm looking for ways to bring women of color specifically, and women, back into the industry. So if I hear of a Black woman in New York who is working on a cannabis science degree, you better hope and better believe that I have her phone number and I'm sending her job anything I can see that has anything related to what she's looking to be in cannabis, because I want her to have a welcome mat to please come back into cannabis. Please bring a woman into cannabis. Like, and that's how I'm treating it, is if we have to mentor people, if we have to keep them as a connection until they're ready, we want to make these places for women, and for me, for women of color, to be here and to represent.
Yeah. I think, like, too, for me, I really think that's interesting, and like that you, like, when you said you started, you came in because you like the prospects of this being like female plant, female business. I started around the same time, like at the dispensary, and I was living in Eugene at the time, and I felt that it was like opposite for me, because cannabis has always been around. It's been around in the illicit market, you know, especially like in Eugene, you have all these glass blowers. It's like the heady glass capital of the United States, possibly even the world. And so I was coming in this very like boys club, but like grow bro boys club of like glass blowers who, you know, like are dabbing out all the time. Like, I think that's literally why I'm such a heavy dabber, because I used to hang out with all these glass blowers. And it was really interesting. Like, you know, I managed a dispensary, and I would have people like question that I was the manager, and would always go to like the guy who was working and like be like, no, he's the manager. And like, I was blessed enough to work with a man that would be like, actually, this girl who is younger than me is the manager, and like, you can talk to her, and would like call people out for that. But it wasn't until I think like 2017 when I like met Ladies of Paradise, and then like met Toktivity, and then met you, and really this like girls club kind of emerged from one space. And I feel like that's where it got so skewed, is like Oregon had a really big like female community in the cannabis industry. Like, not to say that there weren't like other females like killing it. Like in Colorado, there was like Women Grow that was going on, but these few groups were doing things, and that just got like blanketed as the whole industry. Like, oh, women, it's women in cannabis. Women are ruling cannabis. And I think they kind of like used that to like make it seem like it was more equitable, when like in reality those weren't the experiences that we were having. Like, people were, you know, being like sexist towards us, were, you know, like with your case, like getting sexual harassment, like that wasn't that experience, even though it was being like portrayed as this utopia, as this like feminine utopia. It's like, then you go to, you know, MJ BizCon, and it's just white men in like suits walking everywhere, like everywhere, and it's just not what it really is. And so,
you know, I mean, it's a case of representation matters. Like, I think the more we show up, the more we see like, oh, there are amazing women. And I mean, Tokativity, Ladies in Paradise, and myself, technically in any other market would be competitors. And we've made this amalgam of support for each other that's just incredible. I mean, we travel the country like doing stuff together. So it's like, I think in maybe any other market, we would have been pitted against each other. And I feel really blessed that we get to run together and show up together.
I think one of the say this right, the greatest marketing things the legal cannabis industry has done to date is that facade of how great this is for women. And you know, I worked with Women Grow actually quite a bit, and there, to your point, were pockets of like amazing dope shit that I'm really proud of this industry for. But I know from the perspective of people of color, a lot of times companies would stick a white woman on their executive board, or, you know, in some high position, and say, look, we have minorities here. And it was almost kind of like a facade, right, to show what was really happening behind the scenes, not only in terms of the power and equity and control, but then it also put enough people in a position to turn the other eye in the way that we're treating people. You know what I mean? Like at the, you know, you touched on it, on the dispensary level, in the grow level, it's kind of like this culture of male dominance and not feeling empowered to speak up, and if you're called out, not even trusting it. So it's, my point here is, how do we, as people that are in the industry, the panelists, or I'm sorry, the audience is probably in the industry or thinking about it, how do we create that space and create the industry that empowers women to take charge in here, when we know that there's people that have allegedly done very, very inappropriate things that kind of just skate by? And, you know, it's tough for me. I don't see where we go.
I think that it comes with calling it out. Like, I literally had to call it out on various levels. And not just for me, not just for my safety. I mean, the thing that pushed me over the edge, even though I had been assaulted at the dispensary I worked at by my coworkers, like, the thing that pushed me over the edge was when my manager told me that he looked down a woman's shirt who was a customer and was sexualizing this customer on clock in front of other people and bragging about it. And when I saw that it was a danger to other women that were coming into shop, other women who were working there, you know, after I left, it's all in my case, which my case is linked in my Instagram bio. If any woman or person wants to use my case to support their case for sexual assault, harassment, or discrimination, it's there for you. But that was why I felt like I needed to pursue it, was because I had to call it out. And I got stalked, I got harassed, I got threatened, you know, all, and not even just by those people, by people who are in cannabis who are like, you're giving a bad name to cannabis. Like, so I think that it's important to support and believe women, support them, and follow up with them, not just like, hey, I back you, but say, okay, I continue to back you, because it's a long process to call someone out in the legal system. And we have to continue to call people out, because businesses get acquired every day in cannabis. All of the brands that I like and work with can change in the drop of a hat with one acquisition. So we have to continuously check and make sure that these companies, I mean, because they come back, like we've seen Select and Cura do with different names. It's like they went away and put on a hat and a mustache and they're like, it's not me, I'm back. Like, it's like we have to keep investigating, keep calling it out, keep saying, no, we don't take that shit around here, because that's the way that we're going to pursue a better space for all of us. I mean, it's white supremacy. We have to shut that shit down so that shit doesn't keep going. We have to do it with misogyny too. We have to just keep calling it out and make it so we're standing our ground. And sometimes that's legally, sometimes that's just by intimidation, saying we're shutting this shit down, you know, like, but we need allies in doing that. Because when I went to court, it was just me against 10 people who were coming up and saying stuff against me, saying that I was mentally ill, saying that I was not fit to do my job after I'd been winning awards and nominated for awards. Like, you need people who support you, from customers. I mean, I had customers who wrote me and said, this was my first time in a dispensary. I'm a woman. I felt intimidated. I got sexually harassed by your manager, and I never went back to a dispensary again. Like, it's a bad message for everyone, on the consumer side, on the working side. So we just have to shut it down and push it out. We can't allow it, even in the smallest instances.
Yeah, I second that, like, so much, because, you know, for me and like with Select, like, that's all it was. It's like calling out something that happened years ago that was like suppressed, and just like calling out a public article that, you know, I think people have the right to know. Like, we have the right to know who we're supporting, because so many people have unfortunately dealt with like sexual assault, sexual harassment. Like, it's a trigger for people. And like this, especially as like we see more people coming of age, like, and coming of 21 from this like younger demographic, they care what brands they support. Like I care. I don't want to support brands like that. And so I think like calling it out and supporting people is really important. You know, I just wanted to like bring up, when we were talking previously, Livy, like, you said, you know, no one told you you could do it. No one said you could do it. And like, I had the exact same thing. Like, pretty much everyone in my life was telling me that I should just not continue with it. And it's like, I'm getting sued for $10 million. Like, maybe you should just be quiet. And like, is it really worth it? And it's like, it was really worth it. And like, it was so worth it. And I didn't have that support. And so like, I think we talked about this, like, we want to let anyone know, if you are dealing with that, like, you can do it. You are supported. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard as fuck. It's stressful. And like, especially when you're getting sued for like a large amount of money, it's definitely like really, really stressful, but it's important, because it's calling those people out. It's changing the landscape, and it's like setting a precedent for a better life for someone else. Like you said, like, you're stopping
Exactly.
people from experiencing this.
So that's what I want to double down on is both of you are amazing, and like kind of gave me chills down here. But I think you're too humble to admit that when you're telling other people things that they can do, we also needed people like you to help set the precedent that makes it even just maybe that much easier for the next person to do it, right? Or someone telling them like, look, you're going to be alone. I went through this process. You can do it. So I also want to just give you guys some props that every person that stands up and makes a statement, it makes it, in theory, just a little bit, even tiny bit easier for the next person to feel that other people care about what they have to say.
And it's, for me, it was, I could have settled. You don't see a lot of sexual harassment suits go to court. Like, you really don't. And when people saw that my case went to court, they were like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, they didn't settle. And I was like, no, I wouldn't settle. I wouldn't give my voice for pennies on the dollar. And because I have my court case, that case does set a precedence that I can send. And I've already sent it to women who are fighting multi-million-dollar suits, because I didn't realize that you need an actual case to support your case as case law in court. So me pursuing that, even if I had lost, it still would have been a win. And I told my lawyer that. I was like, even if we lose, I still get my day in court, and I still have a case, a record that I sued these people for what they did that was wrong. That's still a blemish on their record, but it can support other people's cases whether or not we win. But of course we won, because I was right to sue them. So I think that it's pursuing it is absolutely hard. I mean, when I called unemployment, I was still working at Mindrate. I was losing my hair. I was being harassed daily to the point of like my body was crumbling. And I had to come in with medical records to say like this job that called us a family. Side note, no job is your family. If any job calls you a family, they're run for the hills. So like this job was, my life, and it was destroying me. And when I walked away from it, I walked away from everyone I knew in the cannabis industry. I walked away from job security, and the unemployment department literally said, don't do it. You won't be supported. Keep being abused. I was like, I'm losing my hair. I'm like falling apart. And the unemployment office was like, well, there's not much you can do. And I walked out anyways. And 3 weeks later, I was in LA throwing a dinner party on a rooftop, starting Livy Small's events. And like, I spent every penny to do that, but it was worth showing up, because I needed to show women they could not only survive, but thrive. Like, yeah, I was losing my hair and falling apart 3 weeks ago. Now I'm on a roof in LA with people from the city of Burbank talking about cannabis reform and feeding people at sunset in this gorgeous place. Like, I not only had to show up, but I had to thrive. And that took a lot more. But if one girl looks at me and was like, well, fuck it, she did it, I can stop taking abuse and have something for myself, then it's worth it.
It's so powerful. And thank you for having that clairvoyance, because this is America. It does come down to the dollar, and how we spend our money, with organizations we partner with, organizations we support, 100% is how we control the industry and the narrative that goes forward. But more than anything, we are a nation of laws, and having that appreciation and that understanding that there needs to be a legal precedent for these cases, and you willing to take on the mental, the financial, all the hardship that came with all that, in order to set that precedent, I think is no one can thank you enough for that, because that is the only way that we are able to move forward in this land, legally. And people don't understand that. People want to think that, oh, we can protest about it and then things will change. That's not the case. It takes someone like you saying, I'm going to do this no matter what happens, and no matter what comes of it, and no matter what I have to go through. So thank you for that. And for the really is the subtle appreciation for understanding how the game works, how it actually works versus how we want it to be, and how we have to play the game in order to change the game. And we, like Cornel West has said, we've tried black faces in high places, and we tried, the industry uses that facade in these puppets or these industries, women in high places, and those don't result in actual change. That change has to start with us and the way we use our dollar, and in the way that we conduct business, and calling it out when we see it happen at the dispensary, when we have conversations like this and we tell our friends about it. You've done a huge milestone for the work. You could put your cape up and call it a day for everything, but I appreciate you keeping going and moving forward, and also being an educator, not only on this issue, but also on the healing aspects and the positive aspects of everything with the plant.
Thank you. It was really, really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to also touch on like I just saw in the chat, really great point. Like it's important to understand the difference of like calling out, like just on Instagram, because we are living in this call out culture, like which can bring a lot of really positive things, but also, you know, you have to know that what you're calling out, you need to be able to fight for in person. So like, you know, don't sit behind a screen and like do things that you're not willing to like do in real life, or say things that you're not willing to say in real life. Because like for me, in my case, you know, it was just a matter of free speech. I was just sharing a public article, like calling out that this company had a CEO who had been accused of rape, which like in my book is not okay. And, you know, that's all it was calling it out. And I got sued for $10 million defamation for sharing like public information. And so, you know, a lot of people told me to just like be quiet and drop it. But I kept fighting, and I like went all the way to a deposition, and like I went and showed my face in like court and was like, you know what, this is like, I stand by what I say. I didn't do anything wrong. And like it is really scary, but I think you have to be willing to like fight in real life for what you like say behind a screen, because we live so much behind our screens, especially like right now during COVID, that I just think that's really important.
And Lord knows, whatever you say behind a screen, you will say in person. I feel bad for whoever had to ask you those hard questions. I'm sure that you served it back to them twice as hard.
Oh, I served it hard.
I will say now, though, I am so good at wasting a lawyer's time if somebody else is paying $500 an hour. I am so good at it. Like, you want me to waste your money? Let's go.
Yeah, that was definitely, I think, like I said earlier, that was like the high of my life. Like I don't think I've ever had like an adrenaline rush so high, just like glaring at some guy like so hardcore, and you know, him being like, well, I just like want you to know we're not taking this out on like you personal, like I don't want this to feel like a personal attack. And it's like, you're suing me for $10 million. It feels pretty fucking personal. Like feels pretty fucking personal.
Yeah, more power to you, girl. DJ, I know you got feelings on this.
Yeah, for sure. I actually had a question for you guys as well. I think that at least I've seen a lot of women or people in general having doing similar things of either like taking their story public or trying to take on some type of institution in this way. For example, like Greek life, I know on college campuses has been a big thing. So I guess a question for me would be, do y'all feel like there was anything about cannabis as such a like young building industry that maybe presented unique challenges, or maybe made certain things easier than it would have been with a more entrenched institution like a fraternity? Or yeah.
I will say there's different laws in cannabis. So like if I had known, my lawyer was an employment lawyer. The dispensary I was suing, they used cannabis lawyers. So an employment lawyer was really the way to go because it was an employment issue. It was employee safety. But they kept using cannabis lawyers and kind of pursuing it as if it was a cannabis issue. And there are different rules for the cannabis industry because our banking is different, the way that we claim things are different. So when you're trying to sue someone who's kind of playing the walnut shell game of like, where's the money? It can be tricky. But I wish I had known, and the one cannabis industry thing that doesn't really translate into law across the board is cannabis companies can't declare bankruptcy. That really changes the way you negotiate for a settlement before or after you go to court. So because they can't declare bankruptcy, because my lawyer was just like, look, they're stupid, and they keep losing their lawyers. Like they were falling apart on their side. He was worried that they would try to dissolve the company or declare bankruptcy before I would see a dime, because they're mean and they're dumb. So, but I found out after the fact that a cannabis company can't declare bankruptcy. So I actually could have pursued for more. I could have gotten more from them. So that there are little things like that that is in the institution of cannabis, because the way that the banking is set up, it's harder to check and see what you can sue for. But as far as like the laws and rules, one of the biggest issues that I found, the reason that I did want to really sue and pursue this case was, if you're a business that's under 15 people, you don't have to have an HR department. But there's no safe consumption spaces. So you're given a sample of cannabis, and in Oregon, our sampling laws are different. So you can only get a fraction of the samples you would get in California. So sometimes you have to share a sample, which means you have to go to your creepy coworker's car or house to consume with them, because there's not enough for you. And then you are intoxicated with your coworker off of the work site, which again, still is something you can pursue in court or complain about as a workplace issue. But because it's off of the workplace site, I thought it didn't count. Like, I can't complain about it. I can't tell my bosses about it. But that's not the case. It's still someone you work with, a coworker who is harassing you or assaulting you, that you should be talking to your boss about. So there are issues that make it a little bit weird. But on top of all of that, we have the bigger issue of, I'm a drug dealer. Legal or not, going to the police about assault as a drug dealer just doesn't make sense in your mind. And I was working in the legal market and a legal dispensary, but when I got assaulted by my coworker, it felt like, well, we're in this cannabis club where we're fighting for laws. I don't want to make cannabis look bad. So what can I really pursue legally, because I'm still working under the umbrella of a cannabis company, and on paper, I'm a drug dealer. That's the long and short of it. So how much do police believe me, whether or not it's legal or not? So I think that because it's a new industry, there are a lot of murky areas for people who are employees specifically, and people who are building businesses, because no one knows how to do this. Every law gets changed as the laws roll out. So I think that there's no one way to do it or one precedence that's really been set. And that can make taking it to court or taking down these other institutions making new laws a little trickier. So you have to be very smart.
Yeah, and I'd also add too, I think to your point, Greek life, for instance, they have old money. So I think that would when you're going in places like an oil industry, Greek life, things like that have a lot of old money. I think that's just always going to naturally be a lot harder, because you're dealing with bigger people, more rich people who have a lot of money to throw at the issue. I did kind of experience that a little with Select, because they come from the tech industry and scammed. You can read the Oregon Live article about changing their LLC and taking money from elders. And so they did have a lot of money, and they threw a lot of money at the case. And I think that's just something you always have to be wary about, is these corporations, when they do have a lot of money, will bleed you out. They told my lawyer that it was going to be a 7-hour long deposition, or 6 hours, whatever the longest amount of time is. It was going to be that long of a deposition. And so my lawyer's sitting there prepping, doing all this work, being what could we even have 7 hours of talking about? And so really it was just a ploy to make him do all this work. So then my bill was higher at the end of it, because he was doing work. He had the other lawyers in the firm doing work, to prep, and then it was a half an hour by the end of it. And so you just have to be wary of that there is going to be a financial burden, especially when you're going up against larger people in larger industries. I was very blessed that my lawyer saw how fucked up it was and ended up doing it pro bono, which was really fucking awesome, and I'm super thankful for him. But yeah, I think that I would just add that for your question.
Those subtleties.
I think that I kind of want to add to that too. People talk about Curaleaf and Select being acquired and being one of the biggest acquisitions in cannabis and CBD, because it was acquired for $1 billion, the billion. But the amount of lawsuits that they took on with that it was probably well over $1 billion in lawsuits. So people have been using that $1 billion acquisition as a cornerstone for this industry is thriving and we're bringing in all of this. But if you're putting $1 billion into a shitty company, you're getting $1 billion of lawsuits out on the other side. And because they have glass in their product, because they're lying about test results, if you're unethical on the abuse of women, then you're going to be unethical in your product too. So they have more lawsuits than I think that Curaleaf even made by acquiring this company just because their name was similar. Cura was similar to Curaleaf, and they didn't want to have issues down the line with it. So they used tech rules to come into cannabis, and they kind of got fucked.
Yo, I got to tell you too, we did not allocate enough time for this conversation. Like, for real, you guys are just dropping facts all over this. And I almost feel like we need to have a V2. We need to have more of this. We're running out of time here, and I have so many questions here on my list. I know Peter has got a bunch. I know that there's a bunch that have come through the Q&A, and we are not going to have time for them. But I just seriously want to thank both of you for not only sharing your story, but just being so bold and unapologetic. And what I really sense is selflessness, right? Like, you understand that it's bigger than one instance, and, you know, setting the precedents for all of those other ones. So I hate that I have to end this, but I'm so grateful. And calling you two dope is way too much of an understatement. So we're going to have to come up with a new term. But, you know, thank you to you guys for joining. Thank you to the audience. I hope you guys love this. I hope we at Revel can empower women in general, but also to show this industry of what it can look like. And, you know, bringing dope people like yourselves into here. They're great stories that are terrible, but it's great that there are people in this industry that really give a fuck about making this better. And I don't have words for how in awe I am of both of you guys. So thank you so much for being a part of this. We got to have V2. The audience is telling me in the chat, we got to have V2.
Thank you so much, Jacobi. Yeah, I really, I feel very blessed and lucky to work with Revel. And to your point that there are so many dope, they're like these small little groups of dope people who are like, want to change it for the better. And I think that's what makes cannabis so great, is it is a new industry. And like, while you have like, you know, fuckers like Kira and Select and like, you know, Dan Blazarian and them like coming in, and Big Mike's like coming in and doing all this stuff. I think that there's a revolution coming and a wave coming, and we have a chance to really make this what we want it to be and like create something that's really inclusive and dope.
Yeah, no more oppressive people. We have to, none of us can thrive under oppression. So we need to really like call out the oppressive people and get them out of our way.
Facts. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, audience. You guys be easy. DJ,
Thank you.
take it away.